All right, hey everybody. Once again, Drumheads podcast. We're with Dinky and Gordo. We're going by our nicknames, Danny. We're joined by Danny Thompson from Face to Face, who is complaining about his crow's feet, as we all have them. So, yeah, we kicked it off with talking about dog farts and getting old. So here we are.
I shouldn't have plugged in this really good camera. My own fault. I shouldn't have plugged in this good camera. It's showing all my age flaws.
So showing all the crow's feet and the wrinkles and the expanding hairlines. Yeah, Jeff's got that. So
we earned it.
Yeah, seriously. So Danny, longtime fan, been a fan of you guys for years.
Thanks.
Just kind of get started. I know you had joined kind of after the band had started, but let's talk about drumming, which is the whole premise of the podcast.
Sure.
How did you get into drumming and playing?
Yeah. I have an older brother, 5 years older than me. And, growing up in suburban Chicago, it was just school band programs were a big thing back then. And, so my brother had played an instrument in the school band. And when you get to be about fourth grade, they give you that option to choose an instrument. And I really didn't. I thought I wanted to be in the school band, but I didn't really have any idea of anything I wanted to play. And I kind of fell into, the snare drum. And, for about a year, that's kind of all I thought about. I wasn't really that into it or anything. And then somebody showed me a Kiss record. And that was pretty much, it was game on from that point on. And I wanted a drum kit.
Which album was it?
Boy, I don't even remember. Probably Kiss Alive, I think, at that point.
I was the same way. Same exact story.
Asked for a drum kit for Christmas and got like a mix-matched used drum kit that my dad got at the local music store. And I really just kind of never looked back, at least for quite a few years.
Yeah.
It's got a private teacher. Finally found like a really good private instructor. This guy, Frank, I got to think of his last name. Saberno, I believe it was what it was. I think I took lessons from him from like maybe sixth grade or so, all the way through high school.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, were your parents okay with the noise of it? Because used to complain.
Totally. I mean, I look back now and it's crazy what they went through, because band practice always happened at my house, and I think of all the bands that have rehearsed in my parents' old basement in Villa Park, Illinois.
Oh, that's great.
Material Issue, that's where we rehearsed way back when. It was in my parents' basement, in the early days when I was in that band. So,
man, I saw Material Issue open for NXS here at the amphitheater, and I had never heard of them. And man, they came out, and I went with some record label people, and they were all saying, like, you got to really watch out for this band. This band's amazing live. And it was I forgot which album, the third album, I think it was, they were on tour with. And I don't know if you were with them then, but oh my God.
I was real early on in Material Issue. So, I was playing in my local punk band in high school, and, I threw a demo tape on stage at the Metro when Naked Ray Gun was playing, and Jeff called me and said we could open for them. And like, that was kind of my first cool gig I played, was opening for Naked Ray Gun. And I was still in high school at that point, like playing on a Wednesday night down in the city, and when I look back, like, my parents were both school teachers. My mom was a fifth grade teacher, and my dad was a high school counselor in the next high school over from where I went to school. So, he knew all my teachers. We played each other in football and stuff like that. And my parents would like let me go play a show on a Tuesday night, and get home at 1 or 2 in the morning. It was, just. Did
you ever have to do that thing where you were standing outside of the venue and waiting for them to pick you up?
At that time, clubs were a little bit more forgiving about the drinking age and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a lot of like bigger shows at the Cabaret Metro might have been all ages. But I did play a lot of club shows over the years before I was 21. And most of the time in Chicago, it was like you showed up with the band and carried your stuff in. And then I just always stayed inside to make sure that I didn't have that issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there was challenges where, I'd play a club and then I wanted to go back the next day to see a band and I would struggle to get in. I started using my older brother's ID for a while. That worked pretty well.
Oh, okay. Well, what were you were going to ask something, Jeff? What were you going to say?
I just said, did your parents drive you to your gigs early on?
Yeah, I mean, before, anything that I did like prior to getting a driver's license, Yeah. So again, back then, at 15, you like made sure you registered for driver's ed, and like the day you were 16, you were like getting your driver's license and everything. So most of the time they didn't do that, but again, my parents were just really easygoing about all that stuff, which you wouldn't think they would have been being educators. But they trusted me, and because of that, I think I always tried to like not be a knucklehead, and do anything too stupid. Senior year in high school on spring break, I drove to New York for a week with my band and stayed in like the crappiest apartment down in the Bowery. And I don't think my parents really knew exactly what I was getting into, but they let me do it. My dad gave me some traveler's checks, which turned out to be a nightmare because like nobody in that part of New York would take a traveler's check.
Wow.
But went out there and played at Maxwell's in Hoboken, and
oh wow,
it was amazing to we would just take the train everywhere, and like we were the drinking age was only 18. No one carded us. We'd show up at like the Cat Club or wherever and just go, oh, we're a band from Chicago. We're playing, tomorrow night. And they'd just go like, yeah, no worries. Come on in.
Yeah.
And, and then like a week later, I had to go back to school and like raise my hand if I wanted to go use the restroom, And so by that point in my life, I was like really struggling with being in school and like having that kind of, I was like, hey, do you know what I just last 4 days ago, what I was doing,
yeah, and then you get in trouble because your project wasn't turned in on time.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and once I got out of high school, I did a lot of practice and stuff in my parents' house, and they were always good with it. My dad said like when he was driving home, like he could hear him like 2 blocks away, like if I was working on music and stuff.
Yeah.
Were your parents musicians?
No, my mom plays piano and sings, so she always sang in like the choir and stuff like that. But her side of the family was pretty musical. My uncle Mark, who's still, so he is 10 years older than me. So growing up in Chicago, my mom had grown up in a small farm community in Wisconsin. And so we would go there anytime we were off school, and we would work on my grandpa's farm. And my uncle Mark, still lived there, and he was a guitar player in a rock band, and I just thought that was the coolest thing,
Were you able to play with him later, like as you got better?
We have not ever really played together. He is, retired from his regular job and plays, acoustic guitar and does shows like at little bars along the Mississippi River pretty much every weekend. So yeah, I would love to like, get up there and do a song with him. I've been playing a little bit of guitar and singing, and I'm a better singer than I am guitar player. So I'm working on the guitar playing stuff. So
well, what's your timeline to get into Face to Face? How did all that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I did the Material Issue thing. Like I said, that was right out of high school. I was in the band for about a year and a half. So it was all, just small clubs and the early days of the band. And I, like you said, when you saw Material Issue, I always knew Jim was really, really talented.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a total nightmare to work with.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that.
I say that with all due respect to him, after he passed and everything. But, I kind of talked a little bit about that in the Material Issue documentary, and they pretty much cut all of that stuff out. So I had left that band, did some other, work around Chicago. I kind of played in like a Ministry style, industrial band, which that type of stuff was super popular in Chicago, like Wax
Right.
Tracks Records, you know,
Yep.
so you had, you know, Al from Ministry living in Chicago. So Ministry was there, and the Revolting Cocks, and My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, and
Yep.
just all that really heavy industrial stuff. And I loved that. And
KMFDM.
yeah, I credit that band for being, you know, the band that got me to have a good meter and to play with a click track like it's nothing, because I had to play the backing tracks, you know, doing that kind of music. And you know, so I really credit that. And you know, my upbringing in that Chicago music scene is really kind of what got me, in a lot of ways, when I look back, really prepared for things later. Because, you know, early in Material Issue, you know, I got to record drums with Steve Albini. So I learned so much about drum sounds and recording. And, you know, his band Big Black was another punk band in Chicago. So we played with them. My good friend Larry Sturm, who unfortunately has passed away, great engineer, producer, did Ministry, later did a bunch of R. Kelly records and stuff. He's really the guy that like really helped me like learn how to tune drums. But you know, eventually I kind of just fell into just working a job. I worked for Guitar Center for 18 years. I'd been working at a music store, and went to work at Guitar Center because it was near an apartment that I had just moved into. And that's how I ended up in California. I got transferred to California. I ran stores out here. At one point, I was a district vice president for Guitar Center in Southern California. I oversaw 13 stores, about $300 million in sales, and, you know, 300 or 400 employees. And I did that for 18 years. And so I had completely quit playing music, you know,
Really?
wasn't doing it at all. I just kind of had this burnout sort of, I don't know. There was a few issues that left a bad taste in my mouth. And, you know, I remember being at work at Guitar Center when someone called me and told me that Jim had committed suicide. And I don't know. I just was, I had like totally lost the desire or interest really in playing.
Mm-hmm.
And just somewhere down the road, I kind of started playing again. I thought, you know, I was in California. I was, you know, enjoying my life and everything out here, but I just like, you know, it might be fun to like play in a bar band, you know, just to do some gigs. And that's how I started. I got in a local bar band, you know, all original band, and went to the rehearsal studio. And there was this band that they shared the studio with called Lefty, which was signed to Interscope, and they were just insanely good. Became really good friends with Kenny, the drummer. And I just, you know, played local bands for 5 or 6 years. And what happened was when Face to Face wanted to get back together to play some shows, Pete had already joined the Offspring. And they actually called my friend Kenny to say, hey, can you fill in for some gigs? And Kenny said, I cannot play fast punk rock, but I know somebody who can. And that's how I got the audition in Face to Face.
Do you think that being around, I got to know Al Jorgensen. He used to come to the club I DJ'd at in Houston, and he was really good friends with the owner, Bruce. And Al used to just show up all the time, and Ministry would come play there quite a bit.
Yeah.
All the Wax Track bands would
Sure.
I think, because that industrial stuff, as you were saying back in the day, you know, it was in the clubs, you know, it went from new wave to techno, you know, industrial, you know, all that sort of stuff. Do you think that playing with the click track and all that stuff kind of got you more, I'll say, quicker, you know, to your reaction times on fills and, you know, whatever else have you? Do you think that helped? Or
I think really it just helped solidify, you know, playing to a click track, which just from a recording standpoint, just, you know, was such an advantage for me compared to, you know, unfortunately, a lot of drummers. Now, Face to Face, we don't play with a click live or anything like that. But, you know, the records obviously were on click. And for me, you know, I actually really like it to be able to just, like, I don't really have to think about it at all. It's just on, and I can just play a track, quite often one take, and, you know, be right on enough with the click most of the time that if you didn't want to edit anything, you wouldn't need to. And that is definitely a result of practicing along to those backing tracks and having that discipline of not being able to rush into a fill or rush when you're in the middle of the fill and come out a little early or a little late.
Yeah.
You know, you had to be much more on.
Any suggestions for people out there on how to play with a click?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple different things that I always like to do practice wise. One was just have a little drum machine and actually program a drum beat instead of just a metronome click, and then play all around it. Right. So I'm doing like wacky, weird drum fills with a drum beat behind me. If you want to hear a great example of somebody who does it like a million times better than me, Ilan Rubin, if you look up his Guitar Center drum off performance solo, that's how he starts the whole thing. Is he's got a Linn drum or an MPC, and he builds a whole kind of drum groove, which takes him about 5 minutes. And he hasn't played the kit at all, and he just builds a pattern. Then he plays over the top of it. That's a great way to do it. And I think that's more interesting and more fun for people than, just putting a on in your headphones, because that can get pretty old. The other thing to do, though, is to take that click track and then start to remove beats from it. So play along to a click track that is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Yeah.
Take the beats out, and then just go eventually to 1, 2, 3, and see if you can play fills and come back in on that one when you've only got a click on the downbeat.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jeff, you're the drum instructor here. What would you say about the clicks and what Danny is saying?
I spent a lot of years playing in a band that used sequence tracks, and the thing that no one ever told me about playing with a click, and it seems counterintuitive to what a lot of people believe, is that you're constantly making micro adjustments. So you're listening, and if you hear that you're off from the click just a little bit, make that adjustment immediately. And I compare that to driving down a highway where it's a straight road, and if you hold your hands stiff, you're eventually going to veer out of your lane. So don't wait until you're in the next lane to make the adjustment. You're constantly making these micro adjustments while you're driving, and same thing with playing to a click.
I think the other thing too to think about is, when you're practicing to a click or a drum machine, is to mentally think about like, okay, I'm going to play a beat right now and I'm going to be really right on the beat. And now I'm going to play a little behind the beat and work on that feel and that groove. So you can still have great feel and be like, behind the beat a little bit in the pocket and be on click. That's part of the skill. And by all means, some of the greatest songs ever, out there were recorded without a click track.
Right.
And that's great. And it all depends on the style of music and what you're doing. And so I'm not advocating that you always have to play on a click when you go into the studio or anything like that. However, it's the same thing with drum tuning. I have this argument with people all the time. In the event that you're asked to play to the click, you better be able to do it. And that's kind of how I feel about it. So if Face wants to record a new song tomorrow and say, hey, let's just go all in, everybody in the room, no click track, no problem. Piece of cake. Love to do it. If they want to do it, remotely, where I record drums in my garage, well, then obviously I'm going to play to a click and then send it off to them and things like that. And I think, you want to be able to do both of those things.
Right. What about your gear? What has changed from your mix match kit to today?
Well, I actually played on the drums, that me and Kenny were building for a while. And then played Yamaha stuff for a period of time. And then I started to work with Q drums, which Ilan Rubin is part of an ownership. I don't know what's happening with Q drums. Jeremy Berman, who was the primary builder, he passed away from cancer. It's probably about 2 years ago now. So I'm not even sure if Q is really still making drums, but I love their stuff. And I would say that overall, in my opinion, Yamaha is the best sounding drums in the world, along with some older Sonar kits that I played on.
Yeah. What about cymbals?
I'm a Sabian guy. I've been with Sabian forever. That's the only company that I have any kind of like, you know, artist deals with or anything like
Yeah.
that is Sabian.
Yeah. What about heads?
I'm a Remo guy. I've used some other brands. I've tried other stuff, but I always go back to Remo. I and somehow I ended up, you know, other than Material Issue, I seem to always end up playing in like a fast, you know, punk style band. I'm really a rock drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, so I grew up on punk rock like the Clash, you know, which is really just
Right.
like, you know, a rock drum beat, you know, and, you know, so I tend to be a little maybe old school in that sense when it comes to like the way I might tune the drums and those kind of things. So, you know, generally speaking, I'm a coded Remo guy for the most part. Either a, you know, like an Emperor X on the snare drum and you know, Ambassador X a lot of times on the tom. So coded Ambassador, the X heads are just a tad thicker, so they hold up a little bit better
Yeah.
if you're a heavy hitter.
It's funny that you mentioned the Clash. I told my wife who we were interviewing today, and she looked up Face to Face, and she's like, "Oh, those guys listen to the Clash."
Yeah, I mean, I for sure Scott and I were huge Clash guys back in the day. So, you know, Trevor came up a little bit different musically. So did Dennis. You know, Dennis was really, you know, in a bunch of rock bands. You know, Trevor played in a metal band prior to Face. But yeah, I in high school was listening to the Clash and Sex Pistols and the Ramones, and I kind of went from Kiss to that because a buddy of mine in, you know, 6th grade, his older brother was in a band. And, you know, I'd always hear about his older brother. Oh, he got signed to a record deal and they're out on tour. So he had older siblings that were like into all the coolest, hippest music. So I went to his house and he's like, here's a Ramones album. And I was like, whoa, what is that? You know, and the, you know, and Devo and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I got into that stuff. And crazy enough, all those years later in Chicago, when I was playing in like an industrial style band, it was with that guy's brother, his older brother.
Really?
Yeah.
That is great.
Yeah. So,
Well, what about your influences? Like, you know, I'm the same way. I started with, you know, Kiss. I was blew my mind. You know, still a big fan of their first couple albums and stuff. But what do you think aside from the Ramones on your playing? Do you still look back at those as influences today, or are you
um,
still, you know, I mean, is it everything?
well, here's the what was always sort of the challenging thing for me. I loved punk rock in so many ways, but at the same time, I wanted to be a good drummer. And so, you know, I had to find certain bands, right? So Topper in the Clash, Topper is like was an insanely good drummer. Could play
Right.
swing and jazz and all kinds of stuff. Wrote Rock the Casbah. Um, you know, it was a struggle for me to listen to like a punk band that the drummer was just terrible. Like that was always a challenge for me. So it's an interesting thing because I love a lot of punk bands and I love the content of it and what it stood for and the overall sound of it. But at the same time, like I would say, drumming influences, Stuart Copeland, hands down, my favorite drummer of all time. But I probably play more like John Bonham than anything else, you know, God, I can't. This is not how I know I'm getting old because stuff I know
You
really
can't
well, I
remember.
can't think of the name. Um, what's the guy in Tom Petty who was just so
Stan
great?
Lynch.
Stan Lynch. That's really more how I play, right? Like if somebody called me and was like, it's a Tom Petty style thing, we need somebody to come in the studio and lay down the drum tracks, I could crush that like no problem, you know, and I would be in heaven doing it, especially at almost 60 years old, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like I think I play more like a John Bonham or maybe like Dave Grohl, that type of style. I just happen to do it in more of a, you know, faster
style. Yeah.
90s style punk band. But what I love in Face to Face, you know, is, you know, I'm playing with like great players, and
right.
we want that quality level to be there.
Do you still keep up with like drumming as a whole? You know, looking at new people that are coming in, or, you know, new artists that are getting exposure and things like that.
To be honest, okay. For many years, yeah, I was obsessed with drumming and all the different drummers and everything. But somewhere along the line, like for me, it was about creating music in a band, you know, being part of that process, writing music, part of the production and the ideas and the package of it, right? I'm not really like a drum geek at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't pay any attention for the most part to like who's some hotshot drummer. You know, obviously I know like in our circles when we're out playing, you know, I pay attention and I'm like, that guy's great, you know, and I make my mental notes, and there's certain drummers I want to, you know, I might want to watch and stuff, but I'm not a drum fanatic in that, like you know, and this sounds terrible to say it on a podcast like this, but I don't really have a desire to go out to the garage right now and play drums. Maybe it's an age thing or something. I'm more likely to pick up the guitar and like sing and play guitar right now.
Mm-hmm.
I will obviously put the time in when, you know, like we haven't played since, you know, the end of November or something. And the first show is, you know, in April. So a couple of weeks out, I'm going to have to go in the garage, you know,
yeah,
and physically get my stamina, like work on that, because it's Face to Face is a really hard band to play drums in. And I can tell you for a little more, we can talk more about that if you want, why it's so hard to play in there. But yeah, I'm not a drum geek anymore. You know, like and I don't want to sound like the old guy, because I am pretty like social media savvy, and I run businesses and stuff, and I do marketing for other companies. So, you know, I literally build Instagram ads for other companies and things like that. But I own a music school, which I've had for 20 years. And so I understand there is a change in the perspective of those up and coming players. For example, you know, we maintain about 60 drum students at our school, which is pretty good.
Wow.
And when we were doing bands, if I had 50 kids playing drums, it was like twisting arms to get one or two of them to want to do it in a band. It's not why they do it anymore. It's totally different. Whereas all of us, we were like, I want to be in Kiss or whatever band you loved. Like you envisioned yourself playing music in one of those types of bands. Yep. That's not what a lot of the kids, I mean, some of course want to be in a band, but it's a different thing.
What do you think they do it for then?
Their own personal engagement, their own enjoyment. They maybe just want to do it online and just be a performer that way. I am not a fan of like the TikTok drummer world. I get why people like it. I only like it, like, to me, unless that guy can, again, it's a totally different thing. That is a different thing to just be able to do crazy stuff online. Like, I could probably do a lot of those things I see if I was willing to go in the garage for 10 hours and practice it. I don't have any desire to do that because it has nothing to do with playing music, right? I want to play music, right? And most of those online drummers, almost none of them actually play music ever. And when they do, most of them suck horribly. Now, again, I can't remember kids' names, but the kid who was like, he's a young guy, great jazz drummer, but then he started playing with suicidal tendencies. What's his name?
Wackerman?
No. Not from a big name. I can't think of the kid's name. If you look him up though, he's playing in suicidal, but he like kind of got his, he kind of came up as one of those internet drummers, but primarily playing jazz. Great player. Okay. So then I give
Grayson Neckrip.
Yeah.
Neckrip.
Some crazy name, right?
Yeah.
Well, I give him huge props for being out there playing shows to 1,000 people you know, or less sometimes in Suicidal and crushing it, you know, like he's doing it. But most of that internet world, like they never really play music. So it's just not
Yeah.
interesting to me. So I don't pay attention to, I'm just not like a drum geek at all anymore. You know, it's just not, you know, what fuels me for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I've always felt like the audience is half of the show.
Yeah,
it's
for sure. Now, I mean, obviously, when we record a song or we are getting ready to play shows, I am like a bastard about like, I really want to be prepared, and I get angry with myself if I feel like I had a bad show or anything like that. You know, like I've never played a show in face to face with even a slight alcohol buzz of any kind ever in the 15 years I've been in the band. Like I'm very like an hour, you know, I'm warming up an hour before the show. Like I take all of that super seriously, but it's part of that band that I'm taking seriously. And yes, I want to play my parts well. And yes, there's times where I'm like, oh, could I get creative and throw this thing in? Or if we're recording something new, I put a ton of effort into the creation of like, what should I play or what do I think I want to play on this track? But I'm just not going to go out in the garage, see some crazy, ridiculous drum fill or something online, and then spend a bunch of time trying to do it. Like,
right. Yeah, there's that guy from Argentina. You've probably seen it.
Yeah.
One hand. I can't remember
Sure.
his name offhand. Blows my mind some of the stuff he can do. But I would really, I mean, I think he plays in a band. I'm not sure, but I would really like to see him perform with a band where you have to keep a steady beat, you know,
Yeah, I mean, maybe
versus
he can do
throwing
it.
all these crazy chops.
Maybe he's got some feel. I mean, I've never seen him play anything that had any remote feel whatsoever. Yeah. So it, like I say, it's a different thing. He's phenomenal at what he does.
Right.
You know, I'm just pretty sure, like I don't know. I don't know the guy. My guess is that a lot of those drummers would struggle, you know, they're not going to be like the studio cat that they used to have in LA that was like Russ Kunkel playing on every 70s hit. That guy's not going to be that guy ever, most likely.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, who knows? Maybe I could be surprised, but you know, and it's a wonderful thing that you can make a career and make money playing an instrument without being in a band or ever touring. It's a totally cool thing. It's just really different, you know? And so it's not something that would excite me in that way, but you know, everybody's different. Me and my partner from the music school have a guitar YouTube channel that we're starting to make a bunch of money from. So it's really cool that that's something that we can do now that we didn't used to do. But from a drumming standpoint, I don't like follow drummers on Instagram or anything like that to watch that stuff at all. It just doesn't interest me.
Yeah, the guys that I follow on social media, most of them are guys that play in bands, and I follow them because they're in that band, not because of the drum geek side of me. I don't. Yeah. I'm like you, you know, and you know, I don't play any longer, but you know, I've got a bass. I started playing during the pandemic and kind of flipped over to that side of things. But you know, I do enjoy watching some of my favorite bands play.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I will watch some YouTube video again. Yeah. It's similar where it's like, well, I like this band and I love this song, but it's really cool that there's a drum cam, you know, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know. I came across a Chicago video the other night, you know, with Wilfredo Reyes Jr. playing. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy, it's so good. It's not super fancy or any of that, you know, it's not internet drumming, right? It's just insane making music drumming.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so I will watch that and be like, wow, look at that, you know? And, you know, I don't know, watching anything that's like, the LA Fire Aid concert was really good. There was a lot of great performances there, and
there was
some shredding drumming going on in that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if we're playing a show or something and Josh Freeze is playing, yeah, I'm going to probably try to be on the side of the stage and watch, you know. But again, it's Josh is a music drummer. He's not an internet. Let me show you how fancy I can be drummer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I remember when Rod Morgenstein joined Winger, and he had been in the Dixie Dregs before, and they were the Dregs were at, the forefront of that kind of fusion rock, kind of Southern thing going on, very technical. And Rod's a, he's a technical drummer. And then when he joined Winger, it was kind of like, really? But then you go back and you watch Winger live, and they were actually great, amazing live. And to watch him just play a simple, that pattern, on all those kind of, glam rock,
sure,
whatever you want to call it, songs, goes back to what you're just saying. I mean, it kind of reiterates the music side of things.
Yeah.
He was able to make that transition.
Sure. I mean, drums, and I'm sure this, because I'm not an expert in those other instruments, I don't know it as well, but drums for sure is one of those things where, like, and as a drum instructor, in the first lesson, you could teach somebody the basics of an AC/DC drum beat, right? We've all taught that, a super straight rock beat. It is a lifetime of effort to play that well. And so it's like golf, right? My dad wasn't a great golfer, right? He, I don't think he got his PGA card, but he was really close. He ended up working at a golf course, like when he retired from teaching. And he could beat the pro at the course about half the time.
Wow.
Okay. So he's better than 98, 99% of guys. Like, and he was like in his 60s and stuff and like playing with guys in their 30s, and he's out driving them. And my dad's like a little guy, or, was a little guy to go. So if you looked at the score of 18 holes of golf and you looked at like a PGA pro and my dad, there's not a lot of strokes difference. Those 10 or 15 strokes, that's like an unachievable lifetime effort, right? It's like we can all, like, I can mix a song for a demo pretty good. To go from mixing a demo and having it sound okay to sounding like an actual record on the radio is like all these tiny little subtle things that no one in the world other than you guys get. And it's a lifetime to try to get to that level.
Right.
Playing an AC/DC drum beat or Tom Petty song at that level, it seems boring. And that's why a lot of people, drum students and stuff, they're like, let me learn Rush or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I know you could sort of play the part, like we had a million kids like this at my school. Yeah, you're kind of playing the part, but you can't seem to play a Ford core rhythm the way that a professional would play it,
Yeah.
And, obviously people have different goals of why they're playing music and learning it. But that's the tough thing with drums is like, it's very hard to see what that difference is in like a pro playing that super simple beat and a beginner, or not even just a beginner. I would say pros and like almost everybody else who plays drums,
Right.
Like I can't really say, oh, you need to do this little thing different to make that difference. It's just, that lifetime effort of playing along to music. So
Sure.
For me, I would say the other thing is that I started playing in bands really young. I was, all through high school, I had some kind of crappy band, even if we weren't playing gigs, just that rehearsal of playing music with other people is where it came from. So that would be like my biggest recommendation to people is play along with records. I'd come home from school every day and put a Police record on and play to it.
Yeah. Well, there was a thread in the punk rock drummers group. A guy started, Jeff, you mentioned something that you made a comment, but the guy was like, hey, what albums should I listen to? And, everybody was recommended all these punk albums. And my comment was, you got to walk before you can run, and to listen to everything, because you can learn something from anything you listen to as a drummer. You can play Fool in the Rain with John Bonham, that shuffle, and then go to, just like you mentioned, something by AC/DC and learn something. Listen to Breakdown by Tom Petty. That beat is so simplistic, but to play it is a
To write it.
whole different
It's
level.
really,
Yeah.
to write it is the thing,
Yeah.
like,
It's slick.
and that's what I always say about Neil Peart, is like, it's not that Neil was really like, I mean, if you've ever watched him step out of Rush and play something, he wasn't really very good at it, right? When he tried to
Yeah.
play swing, I mean, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
He knew that, though.
Yes, he did. And I mean, he is one of the legends. He wrote the most insanely well written drum parts ever. That's what he did great. And then he played those very precisely,
Right.
He had to, because all the drummers in the audience knew every fill.
Right. Yeah. So to do something like that, to create, where you have a band where more people are air drumming the fills than singing the lyrics or doing air guitar, is an incredible
It's amazing
feat. But yeah, writing, to me, that's a skill, like creating the drum part, no matter how simple or complicated it is. When you write that, 50 ways to leave your lover drum beat,
God, yeah.
or something like that, you're like, oh my God, like to create an iconic drum beat or groove. Can you imagine being one of those guys who's like, oh yeah, the most iconic drum intro ever? I wrote that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be technically difficult.
Right.
It's just the thought that goes into it, and you're like, it's genius.
Yeah. And that's like watching. I'm also a big Lynch fan from Tom Petty, and to watch them do that song live on the Whistle Stop, and to watch him play it, it's just. I mean, you watch him and you go like, any simple, any student could do that. It's a really simple, but to play with that feel and the way that he did it,
maturity and conviction.
Yeah, you brought up somebody mentioning like, well, what kind of records should I listen to or whatever? If you're into punk rock, again, and I think people are a little more mature about this. Like, we're not all like, I'm a metal guy only. If it's not metal, it sucks. Or I only love this kind of music. Yeah. I mean, I really like all kind of music, right? I'm not a good jazz drummer at all, but I can sit down and play it a little bit,
Yeah.
And I think you should do that. What I will say I own a music school, but I personally don't do a ton of teaching. But in the past, I've had some students, adult guys, young adults who were like in a punk band, and they're like, wanted to come to me for some lessons. And they're like, I can't do these kind of fast fills or this stuff. And it was always because they didn't learn the fundamental basics in the beginning. Right. So I'm like, all right, well, we're not going to do any of that music. I'm going to take you all the way back to here because you never learned this. And that's why now you can't do that. So, to me, I think, and again, like, especially in punk rock, there are those happy accidents that happen in music, right? Where it's just this combination of these four dudes made something magical, even though the drummer kind of sucked or the guitar player sucked. Yeah. There's things like that always through music, and there always will be, right? You can't predict that. You can't, try to replicate that. Like it's just an accident that it comes together like that. Right. But I think for me to play certainly to play like face to face well, I needed to be able to play Led Zeppelin or Tom Petty well. Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of generally what gets lost in that, those conversations about drumming and punk rock and stuff like
right. That. Yeah. I mean, it's, you can, as we were talking about earlier, you can be as technical as you want to be, but if you don't play with that feel and don't understand the whole concept of music as a whole, you're going to, you get a lot of things get lost. Yeah. And to kind of put a close on that, you understand that everybody, that Jeff understands that as an instructor. You understand that, Danny, as with your time playing. But I never really thought about it until you said that earlier about the influencer style drumming, where you got kids that are coming up or guys who want to just play on camera and play their 3 minutes and then they're done, until they get ready for their next video that they're going to put out, and you want to think that there's somewhere that, where that influence can be kind of brought back, that love of music. What do you think something like that would look like if you were to? Do you think you think social media? Because I'm involved in social media. You're involved. We both do marketing. Do you think that it's to the detriment of the art of drumming?
Oh,
Or
I
do you
don't know
think
about
it can
that.
be reclaimed?
I think it's just changing. I think,
Evolution.
there's always these cycles, and it could always just cycle in a different direction. And all of a sudden everyone's like, okay, we're just going to take 4 instruments and go out on stage and make music. And there's tons of music being made like that.
Sure.
There's tons of up and coming, just indie rock bands and whatever that, we just don't hear about them. Right.
Right.
God, what is the band? I can't, again, my old guy memory. It's like 2 brothers. I think they're from Long Island or something. Not the Lemonheads. That's a little bit. Lemon Drops, maybe something like that. They sound like a combination of the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and that's who their influences were. They're like, our dad played us the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and it's 4 dudes, and you watch, and you're like, oh my God, that sounds like the Beatles. And so to me, when I discover something like that, I'm like excited,
Yeah.
But again, just I love all different kinds of music. I mean, and there's great drummers in like the punk bands that we, tour with. I have there's those guys that I'm like, this guy's a great drummer. Dave Ron's a great drummer. I also know that Dave Ron can go and play Tom Petty or a metal band because I've seen him do it all. He's like a rock drummer.
Yeah.
The guy in I should have wrote down some names and stuff because I'm just so bad with all my names, and I'm terrible in my own band. I don't remember the song titles, right? I'm like, oh, the song that goes like this, but there is a bunch of great drummers out there in, a lot of the peer group bands that we would play with.
Yeah.
I just know from talking to those drummers and getting to know them that they're a lot of them are like really wide on their music of what they listen to and what they play, and so that would be my biggest, recommendation to anyone. I've played on a hip hop song in the studio before and it was amazing. Like if you're not doing like, I like to do all those kind of things,
Yeah. Yeah. I played on a car dealership commercial one time. Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, so you've told me that you had a podcast. Let's talk about
I've
that a
done
little bit.
multiple podcasts over the years. I started podcasting years and years and years ago. So right now I do a podcast called the Highway 62 podcast. So I moved about 4 years ago. So I've lived in Southern California. I came out here in the early 90s with my job, was here about 5 years, got transferred around the country a little bit, lived in Baltimore, DC area, came back to California probably in like 97 or something like that. And I've been here ever since. But I spent most of my time down here in Orange County. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I moved out to Joshua Tree area.
Okay.
Bought a house out there. And Highway 62, Route 62 is the road you take from the 10 freeway up to Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree, and then 29 Palms where I live. And I had produced a podcast years ago called I Heart Costa Mesa, right? Costa Mesa is where my music school is. And I helped these 2 women produce a podcast. And it was basically just highlighting everything cool about that town.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually won an LA Press Award for podcasts.
Oh, cool.
So I am an award-winning podcast producer, even though really all I did is record it for them and mix it. So I took that idea and said, I could do that out here in Joshua Tree. So all I do is talk to people that like either own a cool business are an artist, musician, have a great story, right?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And so one of my upcoming interviews is with Rich Good, who owns a store in 29 Palms called Very Very. That is, you should look it up. It's insane. Rich Good just also happens to be the guitar player in the Psychedelic Furs, you know?
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And so what I learned when I moved out there, I didn't know this on my way out there, was how many musicians and filmmakers and artists live there. So John Sortland, the drummer from Cigar, lives about a block from me in 29 Palms.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah, I've met Rich from Psychedelic Furs, Josh Hame lives out there. There's a couple of insane recording studios in Joshua Tree. And there's a bunch of filmmakers and artists. And a lot of their stories are awesome. Right.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So I will interview anyone that just, has a small business that I think is really cool, because there's a bunch of cool, like, little boutique stores out there that'll blow your mind. There are the food scene actually happening in 29 Palms is great.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
Just that kind of thing. Cool little boutique hotel owners, stuff like that. So I interviewed the woman that owns the Harmony Motel on Highway 62. So the Harmony Motel is where U2 stayed when they hung out in Joshua Tree and got inspired.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. So she's got a picture. There's a picture of them standing there underneath that hotel sign. So I just find those kind of stories to be really cool. So I just, have been doing that kind of thing. And then I actually have a course. I need to record some stuff today for it. I'm doing a little course about how to do a podcast, showing people just all the ins and outs of it, and having it kind of also relate to, like, how to do a podcast if you're a small business owner, right? As a way of marketing your business.
Sure.
So I've met, like, all these great people through, I love the medium of podcasting. I think it's super cool. And I've had some crazy stories. Like, when I was first getting into listening to podcasts, and I was trying to learn more about marketing for my music school. I came from, at Guitar Center, I learned all about business, hiring, HR, P&L statements, just all the number side of it. But the one thing you don't learn working for somebody else is marketing and advertising, unless you're in that world. So I had to learn about marketing. So I was listening to all these, like, internet marketing podcasts and stuff like that. Listen to this guy called Small Business, Big Marketing out of Australia. Got to know the guy a few years later. We're playing in Australia. Get to go have a beer with him,
That's cool.
And I love that connection. And I told this story when I got interviewed on a podcast. There's a guy, James Schramko, who is a big, like, internet marketing podcast guy. He's huge. Another Australian guy. I was on tour in Europe with Face to Face, and this was before you could, like, get a phone plan for a reasonable price overseas.
Yeah.
So I would get to the hotel and get on the hotel internet and then download a bunch of podcast episodes so I'd have something to listen to in the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And I was listening to this guy, James Schramko. So then about 2 years ago, I was a guest on that show, and I had to tell him that story. I'm like, dude, like 10 years ago, I started listening to your show, and this is how we had to do it. So, like, those connections that you make through podcasting, I think is just, like, really, really cool,
Yeah. I really enjoy the format. It's one reason I wanted to start podcasts. I've had a couple others before this one. I got talked Jeff into being on here with me, and he is my foil somewhat, dinky, but what now you in closing, give us some places we can find you, and you have a couple of side hustles. If you want to share those, go ahead and get those out.
I'm always working on something. I have a lot of, I am really kind of like a business geek. I really love marketing and things like that. So,
hey,
but
be
yeah,
sure to email me those links, Danny, and
sure.
I'll put them up on the show
we'll
notes.
put them in there. But yeah, I have the Highway 62 podcast. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you know, travel and, you know, destination.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
Type stuff. You know, you can find me on Instagram. That's pretty much the main social media that I do. I have our guitar YouTube channel for the guitar players called the guitarfactoryoc.com. And then my motorcycle, I'm really into motorcycles and bicycles, anything with two wheels. That's my coolest new bicycle I got right there.
Whoa.
It's called a cruise bike. It's like a recumbent, but the drivetrain is on the front.
I heard those are for old guys.
I know, that's the thing. Except they make actually Cruise Bike makes the fastest bicycle in the world. So they have like a carbon fiber version of this that like guys use in races. They're banned. You can't use them in like UCI, which is Union Cyclists International, which is like the governing body of cycling. You can't use them. Like in the 1940s, these kind of bikes were actually starting to be the norm, but the bike racing world like outlawed that for some reason.
Really?
So like, but in a head-up time trial, one of these bikes is actually faster than a traditional road bike because it's about 15 to 20% less wind resistance, which is the main factor. So all things considered, same rider, same power output, you know, watts, we call it. The recumbent bike will win. But you are correct that mostly it is old people that jump on maybe trikes. Most old guys get a trike. This is a little harder to ride than that. But I had some plans. I want to do like some big trips, and I thought it'd be cool to do it on this. So I'm going to outfit it with bags and stuff and try to do the rails to trails, which you can do about 60% of the US on these rails to trails bike paths that they've created. So I'm really into that kind of stuff. And I started doing like motorcycle camping and things like that years ago. So my motorcycle channel is Miles to Go Moto on YouTube. So yeah. And then, you know, I'm making cool hats and, you know, the Danny DeBeard brand. I haven't really done anything with it yet. This is totally like, I've just been fooling around with it for fun.
Well, cool. Well, we'll put all those links up. And so just to remind you what you do during the day in case you forget. But that was an old joke in case y'all no comment.
Yeah.
Sorry, Danny. Yeah, we'll put the links up on the show and on the show notes. And, you know, we'll get you back on after you guys got some dates with Face to Face.
We don't have a ton this year. We were really busy last year. Like that's the busiest we've been in a long time. Yeah. So our first festival will be April. I think that's like a Punk in the Park festival, one of Cameron festivals. So we'll do.
Yeah, it's Punk in the Park.
Yeah, we're doing like a handful of those again throughout the year. So it looks on the calendar. It looks like late summer is when we get busy.
Okay.
Which is good for me to be busy in the summertime because it's so hot out in Joshua Tree in the summer. So it's good for me to be gone at that time of the year.
Maybe we can get you guys at Furnace Fest. That's here.
We did that. We did Furnace Fest the one time, I think, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to. I know Johnny and them really well.
Yeah,
and I know
that was a really cool location.
Yeah, Sloss.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, it's you know they do a lot of stuff there. Johnny and them that own Furnace Fest. They've been they opened a venue here called Workplay, and they're trying to book a lot of bands, you know, in the genre, punk and metal genre, and some other stuff. They've kind of reignited the music scene here, the live music scene. So hopefully maybe they'll book you guys and go from there.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
All right, Danny. Well, thanks for being on, man. Appreciate it. I know it's kind of short notice.
I love the chat. It was great.
Yeah, we'll try to get you back on after a couple of gigs this summer to see what's going on with you. Anything new, we'll go from there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.